Rhonda and Edie, it's such a pleasure to have you here, and I appreciate you taking time to come so that we can talk to you about your book, The Swedish Country Interiors. And I have to admit, I knew nothing about this style of interior design. So, Rhonda, maybe could you explain to us, especially in terms of flooring, what constitutes that look?
I think keeping to the indigenous materials in Sweden, pine was really what was available. So the way they treated pine in the 18th century was a sand wash, basically sand and water. And as time progressed, another form of antibacterial finishing that also was beautiful was a lime wash. It also preserved the wood and kept it from being damaged in any way, and it was available.
Made it last longer.
Made it last longer, and it was indigenous again, lime. So nowadays we have different ways of reproducing that. A pickling, which Edie's going to be doing, and I'm actually going to be using a liming wax.
And Edie, why do you think, other than wanting the light, I guess, were the floors always so light? Did they not believe in painting, you know, having dark, like we have dark tile or we'll have dark wooden floors?
Right. A lot of it was trying to also imitate in the houses of the nobility the beautiful Carrara marble floors that you would see in palaces. So in a way, this was a very aspirational floor treatment. It wore well, it was cleanly antiseptic, but it also imitated wealthy homes in Europe.
We're still doing that today, aren't we?
We are.
That's right.
This is an example of what we're talking about, and I thought it was interesting. We said earlier, this type of flooring doesn't have to look perfect.
Right, right. I think the more weathered, the more the patina on the floor, the more beautiful it is, really.
And sort of a comfortable feel.
Very
Not
comfortable,
like you
very
couldn't
relaxed.
walk on it.
Very natural, very natural.
Now this looks totally different and looks so really almost ultra modern.
Those types of floors, you know, they work with not just country interiors, but also very sleek, modern interiors as well.
Well, it certainly looks like it. This one's totally different.
It's a beautiful look.
And this one actually is my favorite. I like, because you can see the worn,
weathering, yeah.
weathered, okay.
I think we get too caught up in wanting floors to be perfect. And I think what Edie was saying before with kids and dogs and life, I think the beauty of a floor is that it shows that life. And that's a good example of it. Absolutely.
I like
absolutely.
that too. And you mentioned, one of you did, that there were two techniques. One's pickling and one's with a lime wax.
Yes.
What would make us choose one over the other?
Well, the liming wax is very labor intensive. It's historically more accurate. So if you have an older home, or if you have floorboards that you really want to enhance and show, that you don't want to necessarily cover up with pickle, the liming wax is a wonderful solution.
So you're going to show, what type of wood is this we're using?
This is oak that has been sanded down. And
so we would want to sand our floor.
You would want to sand
lightly.
it down. You'd have a floor person sand it down, or you could sand it yourself with a sander. And then you start applying the wax very, very lightly. It's a paste. It's a paste.
And you're using steel wool.
Steel wool. Fine steel wool. And you don't want to, I mean, the really, really historically accurate way is to get lime and do the wash, but that's very toxic. This is much easier to work with and a little bit more
And do you need to test an area like we sometimes are told to do with furniture, test an underside or
It's a good
something?
idea to test your floor before, you know, test a spot and see the amount of liming you want, and then go from there and get sort of a sample area and then use that as your template.
So you would normally, if you were doing an entire floor, you would do this process all over?
All over, yes.
Okay, so let's go ahead then and look at what you're going to be doing with the pickling.
All right. And this is actually a little less labor intensive than what
like that
Rhonda's doing.
already.
And this is what I used in my own home. And this was actually something I was able to apply by hand myself. And it's actually very easy to do. You get a pickling stain.
Stain.
Okay. And this one's by Minwax. And what you do is, of course,
looks kinda like a
sand
milk,
and wash your
doesn't
floor.
it?
It does. It's very milky.
So
Actually,
again,
it
we
looks sort of
prepare the
milky,
floor just
and
like
you would
Rhonda was telling us.
absolutely make sure it's sanded, but then also make sure you wash it so you get all that
Yeah,
little dust,
dust
or otherwise
off.
you get clumping. And then you just take this,
So it just
and
paints
this
on.
just paints right on. And you know, sometimes I just get a big brush, and you know, if you have a big floor, you can actually use a roller, Sheryl.
Oh, you
and
can. That would.
and you get a roller.
That's a great idea.
And you just put it on.
Now, while you're applying that, let's go back. You're using a steel
I'm
metal
using now a
brush
steel
now.
brush to remove the excess white line.
Oh, so it's working some of it in, but it's
Exactly.
removing the excess.
You want to work it into the wood grain to enhance the wood grain. And where Edie's...
This looks really pretty
It,
right
it
in here.
really is, yeah. And where Edie's board is going to be a little more bleached out, this really brings the wood grain out. It's very, very subtle.
Sort of preserves the original wood grain.
Exactly.
Now, Edie, on yours, how long does this have to set before
know,
you go to
I
step 2?
generally don't let it set too long.
Oh,
I usually would wait maybe 2 or 3 minutes.
And that's why it's important to do that little test piece ahead of time.
Absolutely.
Then you know.
And then what you can do, Sheryl, is you wipe away. See what happens? This isn't dry yet, but you wipe it away, and you can see we're starting to get this effect.
Now,
And
I
what
can
you would
see why
do-
people would hire you to do this. Either one of these is pretty labor intensive.
Yes.
Yes.
But see, what happens is you apply layers of it. So now you would let this dry, and then if you wanted to go lighter, I would
if
do a
you
whole
go
nother
lighter.
layer. And you can get it to the point where you layer it up. So it's very white, although we prefer the more traditional where it's just that very soft bleached look.
Like we
little
saw in that
closer
last
like this.
example.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
exactly. And this is just a fun way to sort of change up a room. You know, you don't have to redecorate. Sometimes you just, they say paint on the walls can change room. Well, redoing your floor is another really
Could
fun
you
way.
use this same technique on furniture?
Absolutely.
Oh, good. That's what I was
Absolutely,
thinking of
yeah.
a chair in particular that I have that I think this would be beautiful to do this to the
Absolutely.
to the arms. It's very ornately designed.
Look how beautifully it enhances the wood, and it's very subtle.
Gosh, and your floor sure would be clean by the
It
time
would.
you got through doing this, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
And then, for either technique, do you apply some type of a finish to seal it, or what do you do?
Yes.
Yes, in the case of the pickle, what we use is
just
a
a polyacrylic.
polyurethane. And this you can do in a matte. This happens to be a sheer semi-gloss, which is also nice. And with this, it doesn't, the poly floats on top of the floor and it just seals it. So it can over the years chip off.
Where?
So unlike this method where Rhonda has an oil she's going to be putting on here, which actually becomes part of the wood. And this is more labor intensive.
But just guessing, would I assume that this technique will last longer?
Both will last equally as long, about 1 to 2 years. The beauty of the oil, the hard oil, is that if an area is worn, you can reapply it without having to strip the floor. With polyurethane, you have to strip the floor and you have to resurface it.
So that's almost where
So-
that becomes as labor intensive
Exactly.
the second go around.
Exactly.
Well, these are really beautiful examples. Once again, this is what you'll be achieving because we can see the
Exactly.
worn effect to it. That's what I really like about it. Well, thank you so much. It's interesting to see really how easy it is for us to create our own Swedish country interior look on furniture or flooring. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you,
Sheryl.
Thank you.